In a quiet Texas town where everyone knew each other by name, the unthinkable happened. A teenage girl was found murdered in the woods behind the high school stadium, stabbed multiple times with a hunting knife. But it wasn't just the brutality that shocked the town. It was who the prime suspect turned out to be. Welcome to the Crime Chronicle Stories channel, where the hidden truths of the world are uncovered, one chilling case at a time. From infamous unsolved mysteries to haunting real-life encounters. Here we dive deep into the most disturbing and intriguing stories from around the globe. Subscribe for a fresh dose of suspense, shocking details, and revelations you won't find anywhere else. Caddo Springs, Texas, with an estimated population of 3,412. A place where the Friday night lights shine brighter than the town's main street. People here go to church on Sundays, leave their doors unlocked, and believe their sheriff, Bill Granger, is as close to a hero as a man can be. The victim? Emily Tucker, 17. Homecoming queen. Straight-A student. Captain of the debate team. She was beloved by teachers, classmates, and her church community. She had a bright future and a secret relationship with someone no one expected. It was a Thursday evening in late April. Emily told her parents she was heading to the library. She never came home. Her body was found the next morning in a dry creek bed by a jogger. The town froze. Her injuries were violent and personal. Overkill, the coroner said. She fought back. Hard. Whoever did this knew her. But the most chilling detail? A single rose left on her chest, the stem wrapped in a sheriff's department ribbon. This was the murder that shattered a love-filled Texas town. In the heart of Texas, tucked between two forgotten highways and 100 miles from the nearest airport, sits Caddo Springs, the kind of town where Friday night football is religion, church pews fill up before sunrise, and the sheriff's last name means legacy. By sunrise, everyone in town had heard the rumor. The sheriff's boy. Blood everywhere. Emily Tucker is missing. The phones rang nonstop. Prayer chains lit up Facebook feeds. And by the time Sheriff Bill Granger pulled into the station, the whole world of Caddo Springs was already cracking like dry soil under Texas drought. But this story doesn't start with a crime scene. It starts with the boy who walked into the station that night. Mason Granger, 18, senior, quarterback, charmer, the kind of kid people said had it made. Handsome, polite, born into power. But power has a shadow. And no one in Caddo Springs could have guessed that behind the winning smile and the varsity jacket was a storm waiting to break. The station lights flickered above Mason as he stood motionless. His chest was heaving, flecks of blood dotting his face like freckles. In his right hand, he clutched something, a silver necklace. It took Deputy Andrea Marlowe 3 tries to get him to speak. Mason, whose blood is that? He looked past her, eyes glassy. It's Emily's, he whispered. I think she's dead. An hour later, the 911 call came in from a local jogger. A body, near the old dry creek bed behind the high school stadium. Female, unmoving, stab wounds. By the time responders arrived, there was no doubt. It was Emily Tucker, 17 years old, star student, top of her class. She had been missing less than 8 hours. Her body was found lying in a shallow ditch. Her school backpack torn open beside her. Books soaked in blood. But one detail stopped everyone cold. A single white rose laid across her chest. The stem was tied with something familiar, a ribbon taken from a Caddo County Sheriff's badge. Bill Granger didn't say much that day. Not when he saw Mason. Not when they showed him the ribbon. And not when they asked if he was willing to recuse himself. He just nodded once, jaw clenched, eyes wet. And he said the words no one in that building ever expected to hear. I'm stepping down. Do what you have to do. The sheriff walked out of the room without looking back. And for the first time in 32 years, Caddo Springs was without a Granger in uniform. Outside, the town was already buzzing with confusion, fear, and something uglier, suspicion. Emily was loved, not just by her family, but by teachers, classmates, the church choir, even the mayor. She wasn't just another high school girl. She was a symbol of hope in a town that hadn't seen much change or light in years. She was going places. She was getting out. And now she was dead. In the hours that followed, Mason was taken into custody. not formally arrested, but held for questioning. He refused a lawyer. He asked only for water and his mother. When the detectives began asking what happened the night before, Mason's story wavered. "We were just talking," he said. "In the woods. She wanted to be alone." "Why?" "We were breaking up. It got emotional." "Did you hurt her, Mason?" I didn't mean to." That last line chilled the room. Didn't mean to? By nightfall, search teams were combing the woods behind the stadium. The place where Emily's body had been found was marked off with yellow tape and lit by portable lamps. It was eerily quiet, save for the hum of crickets and the occasional camera shutter. One forensics tech noted there were drag marks, a sign Emily had been moved, possibly by someone strong. Her injuries told a brutal story. 13 stab wounds, some defensive, one fatal. Her hands were broken in multiple places. She had fought back hard. This wasn't a random killing. This was personal. By day 2, grief turned to rage. Vigils turned into protest signs. Justice for Emily was spray-painted across the steps of the sheriff's office. Some people refused to believe Mason was involved. "That boy grew up with Emily," said Pastor Glenn Monroe. "He carried her books in 4th grade. He cried when her dog died. He loved her." But others had noticed signs. A temper, possessiveness, a strange look in his eye when other boys talked to Emily. Her best friend, Lila, would later say, "She told me she wanted to end things." Said Mason scared her when he got mad. Said he wasn't who she thought he was. The sheriff remained silent. He gave no interviews. He issued one statement. "My heart is broken. I believe in the law. I believe in the truth. And I believe in my son." But not everyone shared that faith, because there was one more detail that hadn't been released to the public yet, something that would make this case impossible to ignore. When detectives searched Mason's truck the morning after the murder, they found a blood-stained sweatshirt balled up behind the seat. Tucked inside the pocket was a torn envelope. On it, written in Emily's handwriting, "If anything happens to me, start with Mason. If you're not from here, you probably missed the turnoff." One gas station, a diner that still handwrites orders, and a church bell that rings even when nobody's listening. Welcome to Caddo Springs. Population 3,412 and falling. You could drive through Caddo Springs in under 7 minutes and not remember a thing about it. To outsiders, it was just another sunburned speck on the Texas map, an aging water tower, a row of shuttered feed stores, and wind-whipped fields that never quite stayed green. But to the people who lived here, Caddo Springs wasn't just a town. It was home. It was history. It was sacred ground. Here, folks knew each other's middle names. Kids grew up playing in the same schoolyard their parents once did. Teachers still hung paper stars on honor boards. And on Sunday mornings, the church parking lot looked like a family reunion. That's what made what happened to Emily Tucker so unbearable. She wasn't just a victim. She was the town's brightest flame, and now she'd been snuffed out. Emily Ann Tucker was born in the back bedroom of a trailer on Clear Creek Road during the worst thunderstorm of 2007. Her mother, Susan, still swears the lightning struck the same moment Emily cried for the first time, like the sky was making room for her. She was the youngest of 3 kids, but everyone knew she was the one destined for more. At Caddo High, Emily earned straight A's, won debate trophies, and was accepted early to UT Austin on a full ride. First in her family to go to college. She also sang in the church choir, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and helped Coach Beltran organize the senior blood drive. If she ever had a mean thought, said her English teacher, she never said it out loud. But beneath the sweet exterior, Emily was ambitious, independent, and, most importantly, ready to leave. She kept a list titled, "Places I'll Go Someday," taped above her bed. First on that list, anywhere but here. The day before she disappeared, she was seen walking with Mason Granger after school. They weren't holding hands. No one saw them kiss. But the tension between them, it was visible. She looked nervous, one classmate later recalled. "He looked pissed," said another. Like real pissed. It wasn't the first time someone had noticed. Behind closed doors, Emily had confided in her best friend, Lila Hensley, that Mason had become possessive, jealous, angry in ways that scared her. "He punched a locker because I didn't text back fast enough," Emily had written in a note. Sometimes he's so sweet. Other times, I think he wants to own me. Lila urged her to break things off. Emily promised she would. On the afternoon of March 14th, Emily left school at 3:41 p.m. Security footage showed her exiting the east doors alone, backpack over her shoulder. She never made it to her car. That evening, her parents began to worry. Emily never missed dinner. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her location-sharing app had stopped working. By 10 p.m., they filed a missing persons report. The next morning, Mason Granger showed up at the station, barefoot and bloodied. Emily was found dead less than an hour later. The Tucker family wasn't prepared for the way the story unraveled. No one is. Grief in a small town is like a bomb going off in a house with no walls. Everybody feels it, everybody sees it, and nobody knows what to do with the rubble. Emily's parents, Susan and Gary, stood in silence at the vigil that weekend, candles flickering in paper cups, neighbors weeping, someone strumming an out-of-tune guitar. A photo of Emily, printed on glossy cardboard, leaned against the base of the courthouse steps. Her smile, forever 17. Her eyes, unknowingly prophetic. I should have picked her up that day, her father would say later, his voice cracking. She asked me to. I told her I was too busy. The Granger name had once been untouchable. Sheriff Bill Granger was a war vet, 3-term elected official, and high school football legend. He'd arrested meth dealers, negotiated with ranchers, and led search parties during hurricane season. He was the kind of man you called when your dog went missing or your kid got too drunk to drive home. And Mason? Well, Mason had always been the golden boy. He had his mother's smile and his father's badge. That kid was Texas royalty, said Coach Beltran. If Mason did something wrong, it had to be a mistake. But mistakes don't leave 13 stab wounds. Mistakes don't end with a white rose on a dead girl's chest. As rumors spread, lines were drawn. The town fractured. Some believed Mason was innocent, framed, misunderstood, broken. Others demanded blood. If his last name wasn't Granger, one protester shouted outside the station, he'd already be in jail. That's when District Attorney Rivas made the rare move of requesting outside investigators from Austin. Neutral, uncompromised. That's also when the sheriff, once the face of Caddo Springs, officially stepped back from the case. My heart is torn in two, he told the press. I love my son, but I believe in justice. Behind closed doors, Mason waited in a gray interview room, face bruised with exhaustion. When asked again how Emily died, he gave no clear answer. I blacked out, he said. You blacked out. I didn't mean for it to go that far. He refused to speak further without a lawyer. Then there was that envelope, the one found in his truck. Emily's handwriting, a single, chilling sentence. If anything happens to me, start with Mason. That's when the people of Caddo Springs realized. This wasn't going away. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was murder. And someone they'd loved, someone they'd raised, praised, protected, might be the one responsible. As the investigation deepened, more secrets were about to come loose. Secrets about Mason, about the sheriff, and about the night Emily Tucker was silenced forever. They say she was laid there gently, not tossed, not dumped, as if someone still cared, as if someone wanted her to look peaceful. But Emily Tucker didn't die peacefully. Her hands told a different story. The sun hadn't yet risen over Caddo Springs when forensics teams first stepped into the woods behind the high school stadium. The air was cold, sharp with morning dew, and eerily quiet, just the distant hum of cicadas and the metallic rustle of tape. Then they saw her. Emily Tucker lay in the shallow bed of the dry creek, her dark hair fanned across brittle grass, her jeans torn, her eyes half open as if trying to warn whoever found her. Across her chest, a white rose, fresh, unbruised, surreal, rested like a signature. She wasn't buried. She wasn't hidden. She was placed. Intentionally. Lovingly. And that made everything worse. The lead investigator from Austin, Detective Jonah Avery, stood over the scene, arms folded. He had worked cartel killings in El Paso, serial predators in Houston, and once unraveled a double murder in a mountain town with fewer people than Caddo Springs' graduating class. But this case, it felt different. That rose, he said quietly to his partner, That's not rage. That's message. Whoever did this didn't just want her dead. They wanted to say something. The medical examiner's report would later confirm what Emily's body already screamed. 13 stab wounds, mostly to the torso. 4 broken fingers, defensive. Bruising on the arms, suggesting restraint. And a deep gash above her right eyebrow. Likely the first blow, possibly with a rock or heavy flashlight. The fatal wound? A direct puncture to the heart. She died within seconds of that last strike. But what haunted the team the most wasn't how she died. It was how long she fought before she did. Detective Avery began constructing a timeline. Emily left school at 3:41 p.m. By 4:15, she was seen near the football bleachers with Mason Granger. At 5:09, Mason's phone went dark. By 6:02, Emily's phone stopped pinging altogether. She was reported missing at 10:17 p.m. Mason walked into the station, covered in blood, at 3:17 a.m. That left a 9-hour window. 9 hours unaccounted for. 9 hours where a girl with a future was erased. Then there was the ribbon. It had once been attached to a Caddo County deputy badge. Sheriff Granger's badge, to be exact. It had gone missing 2 weeks earlier, reported lost by Bill Granger himself. At the time, no one thought twice. Things got lost in the field, in the truck, in a locker. Now, it was found wrapped around the stem of the white rose, the kind of detail that chills your spine in layers. Was it a warning? A taunt? A message from son to father? Avery didn't know yet, but he knew this. It was personal. Inside the station, Mason wasn't talking anymore. After his initial day's confession, "I didn't mean to," he'd shut down, requested an attorney, and sat in silence. But the public didn't care about due process. By day 3, Emily's story was viral. Her face was on morning shows. Headlines screamed, "Texas town reels after star student's brutal murder." Sheriff's son at center of teen girl's death. Love, jealousy, and a white rose. The murder of Emily Tucker. In the small town of Caddo Springs, national cameras began to arrive. Journalists gathered on Main Street like vultures on power lines. Every neighbor became a suspect. Every family secret a potential motive. But one secret had already started to crack open. Emily's best friend, Lila Hensley, came forward. With tear-stained cheeks and a voice like glass, she told Avery what Emily had confessed to her. She said Mason had started following her. After school, on her runs, even to work. He'd get angry when she didn't answer fast. He once left 43 missed calls in one night. That's not love. That's obsession. Emily had broken up with Mason 2 weeks before she died. But he didn't take it well. He told her if she left him, she'd regret it. That same night, Lila said Emily gave her a sealed envelope. She laughed when she handed it to me. Said, "If anything happens to me, this is for the cops." I thought she was being dramatic. I didn't open it. I didn't think I'd have to. Inside the envelope, written in Emily's perfect script, "If I go missing or something happens to me, start with Mason. He scares me sometimes. I've told people, if you're reading this, then I was right to be afraid." Detective Avery stared at the note for a long time. He'd seen suicide letters, confessions, warnings scribbled in lipstick and blood. But this was different. This was a premonition. This was a girl begging not to be forgotten. But just as the case seemed to crystallize, victim, motive, suspect, a complication arrived. Mason's alibi. One of his teammates, Jordan Mills, came forward with a statement. "I saw Mason around 6:30 that night. He was at the Whataburger drive-thru. We talked. He didn't seem upset." Detective Avery confirmed the timestamp. Mason's phone didn't ping, but his truck did, near the fast food joint 6 miles from the creek. Could he have killed Emily before and then returned? Could someone else have used his truck? Or was someone protecting him? Avery wasn't sure yet, but he knew small towns had layers, and loyalty here could hide a body. The final detail that unsettled everyone involved came from the crime lab. The white rose found on Emily's chest. It didn't grow wild in Caddo Springs. It was traced to Leone's floral shop 2 towns over, and the florist remembered the order. "Tall young man," she said, "blonde, very polite, came in 3 days before the murder. Asked for one perfect white rose. Said it was for someone special. He paid in cash. Gave no name. But he wore something distinctive. A Caddo Springs Letterman jacket. There's a moment in every love story when the line between passion and possession gets blurry. For Emily Tucker, that moment wasn't metaphorical. It was fatal. It was March 12th, 2 days before Emily Tucker's murder, when a white rose was purchased. The florist remembered him clearly. Tall, fair-skinned, clean-cut. He had a nervous energy, the kind that puts people on edge, like he was about to ask someone to prom or rob a bank. He kept tapping the counter, she recalled. Said he needed one white rose, just one. It's got to be perfect, he told me. She handed him a stem she'd just trimmed. He stared at it for a few seconds before nodding. She likes things neat, he said. Neat, quiet, beautiful. He paid in cash. Wore a Caddo Springs high Letterman jacket with a football patch. No name, no phone number, no trace on camera. But Detective Avery didn't need a receipt to know who bought the rose. He already had a name. Mason Granger. Football captain. Honor roll. Son of the most powerful man in town. But under the surface? Cracks. Teachers remembered angry outbursts. Girls whispered about controlling behavior. Once, he broke a rival's nose in a hallway scuffle, called it an accident. Twice, his ex-girlfriends had asked school staff to speak with him. Nothing ever stuck. Not when your last name was Granger. Not when your father wore a badge. Detective Avery sat with Mason's school counselor, Mrs. Evelyn Marks, a woman who had worked in the district for 31 years. She didn't smile when he mentioned Mason. He was intense, she said. Emily used to come to me with concerns, especially after they started dating. What kind of concerns? Avery asked. Mrs. Marks took a breath. That he watched her too closely. Tracked her phone. Showed up to her job unannounced. Would explode if she didn't respond immediately. Did she file a formal complaint? No, she whispered. She was scared. But more than that, she didn't think anyone would believe her. She said, his dad's the sheriff. What am I supposed to do? As the picture darkened around Mason, Avery found himself circling the same question. Was this the act of a jealous teenager? Or was it something worse, planned, patient, obsessive? That white rose said more than any note could. This wasn't a moment of heat. This was a performance. A ritual. The rose wasn't placed after the murder. It was bought before. Meanwhile, back at the Tucker residence, grief was devouring the walls. Susan Tucker hadn't left her daughter's room in 2 days. She'd taken to sitting on the edge of Emily's bed, clutching her daughter's hoodie to her chest like it could breathe for her. She was getting out of here, Susan whispered to the officer posted at their home. She was going to leave this town, go make something of herself. I should have pushed her harder to go sooner. Gary Tucker, once a sturdy man with hands like bricks, now moved like a ghost, quiet, thin, sunken eyes. He didn't speak much anymore. But when Detective Avery visited that evening, Gary had one thing to say. You get him, he said. I don't care who his daddy is. I want justice for my girl. The next day, Avery received surveillance footage from a gas station off Highway 29. Timestamp. March 12th, 7:03 p.m. The same day the rose was bought. The footage was grainy, but it was enough. Mason's truck pulled in. He stepped out, walked inside, bought a soda and a pack of gum. Then he returned to the truck. But he wasn't alone. Emily was in the passenger seat. Her face looked tense. She wasn't speaking. She had her arms crossed, turned slightly toward the door, like she was ready to run. Mason opened her door, leaned in, and said something. She flinched, then got out of the truck. The camera cut off before they drove away, but the body language said enough. This wasn't love. This was something unraveling. That same night, Avery requested Emily's phone records. What he found next made his stomach tighten. On March 12th, Emily had tried to call an unknown number 5 times between 10 o'clock and 11:30 p.m. No voicemail, no text follow-up. The number wasn't in her contacts. The calls were short, rings, not conversations. He traced it. It belonged to Sheriff Bill Granger. Avery wasn't naive. In small towns, law enforcement blurred lines between duty and protection, between justice and family. But this? Emily Tucker had tried to reach the sheriff. Late at night. Repeatedly. And 2 days later, she was dead. What did she want to say? What did she need him to know? And why didn't he answer? Avery went to the sheriff's home unannounced. The once proud officer answered in a faded t-shirt and old jeans. He hadn't shaved. The lines around his eyes looked deeper than they had a week ago. Avery got to the point. Your son's girlfriend called you 5 times the night before she died. You never called her back. What? The sheriff's jaw clenched. He looked out at the porch railing for a long moment before answering. She left me a message. Said she needed to talk. That it was serious. I was tired. I figured it could wait till morning. Did you listen to the message? He shook his head. Didn't think it was urgent. She didn't sound scared. Just upset. But now? Avery asked. Now I'd give anything to go back and pick up that call. Later that night, Avery received the voicemail. It had been deleted, but recovered through digital forensics. He played it alone in the dim light of his hotel room. Emily's voice came through the speaker, cracked, shaking, terrified. Sheriff, it's Emily. I need to talk to you. Mason's, he's not okay. He said if I leave him, he'll make me disappear. I don't know what to do. Please call me back. A pause, a shaky breath. I think he means it this time. In the end, it wasn't a scream or a struggle that haunted Detective Avery most. It was a whisper, a message left in the night, a girl asking for help that never came. The voicemail played again in Avery's mind as he stared at the ceiling of his motel room. Emily's voice, frantic, brittle, on the edge of breaking, echoed in the small, stale space. Please call me back. It was the voice of someone who still believed help might come. Avery knew the signs. He'd heard plenty of post-mortem messages from victims. But this wasn't a woman making peace with death. This was a girl trying to live and begging for someone, anyone, to help her do it. But no one did, especially not the man who could have changed everything. The next morning, Avery arrived early at the sheriff's office. The usual chatter fell silent the second he walked in. Deputies glanced up, then away, eyes heavy with something between guilt and fear. Sheriff Granger wasn't in yet, or maybe he was avoiding him. Avery didn't care. He walked to the evidence room and reviewed the chain of custody logs. Something about the badge ribbon kept nagging at him. Granger had reported it missing 2 weeks before Emily's murder, but there was no mention of how. Why hadn't he filed it with the department? Why was it noted only in his own personal logbook? Back in the interrogation room, Mason Granger still wasn't talking. He sat in the same slumped posture, eyes ringed with red, staring at the wall as if trying to blink away the nightmare. His lawyer, Carla Bishop, flown in from Dallas, watched Avery closely as he entered. My client will not be answering any further questions, she said, unless you're charging him. Avery ignored her and laid a single photo on the table. The floor sketch of the boy who bought the white rose. It wasn't photographic, but was close enough. You recognize him? Avery asked. Mason didn't look. He doesn't have to answer that, Bishop said. But Avery wasn't asking for answers now. He was watching for flinches, micro-expressions, fear, and he saw it. Just the slightest tick, the jaw muscle tightening, a glimmer of sweat above Mason's left temple. It wasn't proof, but it was something. Outside, Avery met with Lila Hensley again. Emily's best friend looked thinner, worn out, like the trauma had started eating at her physically. She carried a notebook, Emily's, pages dog-eared and filled with quotes, doodles, and private thoughts. I didn't want to read it first, she said. It felt wrong. But now, Avery turned through the pages slowly. Most were harmless. Song lyrics, to-do lists, a bucket list for college. But near the back, dated just a week before her murder, Emily had written, Mason scares me. Not like yelling scared. Like he sees me as something he owns. I tried to break up with him, but he cried. Then he grabbed my wrists. Said, we're forever. You promised. Avery kept reading. I don't know how to get out. I think his dad knows something. But even if he does, he'll protect Mason. Always has. That line stopped Avery cold. He'll protect Mason. Always has. What did Emily mean by that? What else had the sheriff hidden? That afternoon, Avery walked the football field, where Emily was last seen alive. It was eerie now, the stadium empty, the bleachers cold, the sound of the wind replacing the roar of Friday night lights. He stood in the spot where Mason's phone had last pinged before going dark. Just beyond the fence, Avery noticed a small utility shed. It wasn't on the original search list. He pried it open. Inside, stacked chairs, water coolers, and a faint, sour smell. He stepped in, his flashlight sweeping the corners. And then, he saw it. A scrap of fabric. Torn. Light blue. Stained brown. Avery bagged it immediately. Lab results would later confirm it matched the blouse Emily was last seen wearing. She'd been in that shed. Possibly restrained. Possibly worse. And the blood? It matched Mason Granger. With this new evidence, Avery requested a warrant to search the Granger home. It wasn't easy. The town's judge had known Bill Granger for 30 years and didn't appreciate being told how to do his job by a big city detective. But the voicemail, Emily's own words, and the fabric evidence turned tide. Warrant approved. The Granger residence sat at the end of a quiet road, a sprawling ranch-style house with a long driveway and a porch swing that creaked slightly in the wind. Inside, Avery and his team searched everything. Most of it was clean. Too clean. In Mason's room, drawers were neatly organized. Clothes folded military style. Notebooks arranged alphabetically. But tucked in the back of his closet was a wooden lockbox. Inside, letters. Dozens of them. All written by Emily. All torn up, some taped back together. And one, never sent, written by Mason. If I can't have you, no one will. But don't worry. I'll make you beautiful even in death. I'll make them all see what I see. Avery read it twice. It wasn't poetry. It was prophecy. Just as he was about to leave, Avery's phone buzzed. The lab report. The blouse fragment from the shed had both Emily's and Mason's blood. But it had something else, too. Traces of leather fiber. Sheriff Granger wore custom-made leather gloves during patrols, his signature piece. One of them had gone missing weeks ago, and the fiber matched. It had been at the crime scene. So why was his glove there? And why was his badge ribbon on the rose? Avery's mind raced. What if Mason wasn't the only one hiding something? In a town where loyalty runs thicker than law, justice doesn't always rise to the surface. Sometimes you have to dig it out, bloody and buried. When Detective Avery arrived at the Granger residence the next morning, the house was silent. Bill Granger was on the porch, the familiar leather gloves gone, the swing creaking behind him. The weight of fatherhood and scandal had taken its toll. His shoulders drooped, his eyes hollowed by sleepless nights and shame. "We need to talk," Avery said. Granger nodded, almost relieved. Inside, over black coffee in chipped mugs, Avery laid the findings on the table like cards in a high-stakes hand. The blouse scrap in the utility shed, Emily's. Her blood, Mason's blood, and Avery paused. Leather fibers. Your gloves. The sheriff didn't speak. You want to tell me how a glove you claimed went missing 3 weeks ago ended up near your son's dead girlfriend's blood? The seconds ticked by. I don't know, Granger finally said. I swear to you, I never went near that shed. If that glove's there, then someone planted it. Avery watched him carefully. Or someone lent it. Granger flinched. You think I gave my son a glove to commit a murder? I think your son was spiraling, and you were too afraid of what he might do to stop him. He's my boy, Granger said quietly. I thought he just needed time. That he was heartbroken. Obsessive, yes, but not violent. Avery leaned forward. Did you ever see him hurt her? The sheriff stared into his cup. Then, softly once. It had happened 2 months earlier. Granger had come home early from a patrol shift. Mason and Emily were in the kitchen. She was crying. Mason was gripping her wrist tightly. Too tightly. I told him to let go. He didn't. Not right away. Granger said he pulled his son off her, sent him to his room. Emily fled without a word. She never came back to the house. I grounded him. Took his car keys. I thought that was enough. Avery sat back. You didn't report it. You didn't file an incident. He's my son, Granger repeated, more desperately now. He's all I've got. Avery sighed. He understood the dilemma. As a father, you protect. As a lawman, you prosecute. But when those two callings collide, you should have picked her, Avery said. She was the victim. Back at the station, the town was waking up to rumors. Something about the glove, something about evidence pointing to the sheriff. Deputies whispered in corners. Coffee went cold. By noon, the mayor of Caddo Springs called a special session of the town council. Bill Granger was placed on administrative leave. The sheriff's badge, polished and heavy, was turned in. The sound it made as it hit the desk was deafening. Meanwhile, Mason sat in a cold cell. No TV, no phone, just a cot, four walls, and the echo of his own breathing. His lawyer tried to assure him they were handling it, but the evidence was piling up like Texas summer heat. Avery returned for another visit. They pulled DNA from the glove fibers, he said. Yours, not your dad's. Still, Mason said nothing. She loved you, you know, Avery continued, but not the version of you that wrote letters promising to keep her forever. Not the one who tracked her phone. She loved the boy who walked her home sophomore year, who drew silly pictures on her backpack. For a moment, something flickered in Mason's eyes. Regret? Grief? Or guilt? She lied to me, Mason whispered finally. She said we'd always be together. Avery leaned in. So you killed her? No, Mason said flatly. Avery waited. I didn't kill her, Mason repeated. I just found her. That confession upended the case. If Mason didn't kill her, but found her, then who did? Avery went back to the basics. Timeline, phone records, witnesses. He found a gap. Between 9:45 and 11 p.m. on the night of March 14th, both Mason and Emily's phones went dark. No calls, no texts, no data, except one anomaly. A text sent from Sheriff Granger's burner phone, flagged by forensics, was pinged at 10:07 p.m. near the outskirts of the woods behind the football field. It read, "Where are you? You said you'd wait." The recipient? Unknown. But the location? Less than a quarter mile from where Emily's body was found. Avery returned to Bill Granger one last time. This time, he didn't ask. He showed him a map. The ping. The burner. The sheriff broke. I thought I could control it, he said. I didn't think it would get this far. What did you do? I followed him that night, Granger said. I'd seen the way he looked at her lately. Dark. Possessive. I knew he was going to see her. I didn't expect what I found. He told Avery he arrived too late. Emily was already on the ground. Mason was crouched over her, whispering things only he could hear. She wasn't breathing. I didn't check her pulse, Granger admitted. I was in shock. My boy looked up at me and said, "It's okay now. She's safe. She won't leave." Avery was silent. I should have called it in. I should have done everything by the book. But all I could think was, he's my son. So, the sheriff staged the rose. Took off his glove when he touched her hair. Planted the badge ribbon. He thought if it looked like a stalker, a stranger, it would delay suspicion. But it only deepened it. Later that evening, Avery stood at Emily's grave, the wind tugging gently at his coat. Justice in Caddo Springs was coming, but it was far from pure. The sheriff didn't kill her. Mason might not have meant to, but someone had taken her life, and no one had saved her. Not in time. Small towns keep secrets like families keep heirlooms, locked away, polished when needed, and passed down like debts. But when the glass breaks, it cuts everyone. By the following morning, Caddo Springs was no longer just a town. It was a crime scene. The headlines hit local radio and social media like a prairie fire. Sheriff's son suspected in prom night murder. Evidence points to Granger family cover-up. The girl everyone loved and the boy no one really knew. By noon, angry citizens gathered outside the sheriff's office. Some held candles. Others held signs. Most just wanted answers. They didn't get any. Sheriff Granger, disgraced and suspended, had disappeared from public view. And Mason, still silent in his cell. Detective Avery watched it all from the second-floor window of the station. The shouts below echoed through the glass. Why'd they protect him? Where were the deputies that night? If it were my daughter, that last voice made Avery flinch. He'd heard it before, in Chicago years ago, after a domestic violence case spiraled into a double homicide. A father had begged for a restraining order that never came. His daughter ended up dead, just like Emily. History doesn't repeat, it rots. Quietly, from the inside out. Back in the evidence room, Avery and forensics analyst Nico Ramirez combed through the digital timeline again. Something still wasn't right. Emily's phone had gone dark at 9:46 p.m. Mason's at 9:47. But a photo had been uploaded from Emily's Instagram at 10:12 p.m. A picture of the moon, grainy, uncaptioned, no comments, just a sliver of light breaking through the branches. Ramirez zoomed in. There, a faint reflection in the lower left corner. The curve of a windshield. A bumper maybe. Avery leaned in. Can you enhance? It took 20 minutes and a digital reconstruction filter. But what emerged stopped both men cold. A decal on the bumper. Caddo Springs Fire and Rescue. There were only 2 active members of the local volunteer fire squad with that car model. One of them was Tyson Wells, a 26-year-old EMT and former classmate of Emily's older brother. Wells had known Emily for years. Always friendly. Always available. Too available. Avery pulled his file. No priors. Clean record. But the kind of guy who always showed up when tragedy struck. Not because he was assigned. Because he inserted himself. He'd been first on the scene when a middle schooler broke her leg at a fall carnival. He'd found a missing dog in the woods. And he was one of the volunteers helping canvass for Emily before her body was officially reported missing. Helpful. Too helpful. That afternoon, Avery paid a visit to Tyson's home. A modest trailer on the edge of town, tucked behind a grove of pecan trees. Tyson greeted him at the door in gym shorts, sweat on his brow, a bottle of Gatorade in hand. Hey, detective. Didn't expect to see you out here. Everything all right? Just tying up loose ends, Avery said. Mind if I ask you a few questions? Sure, yeah. Come on in. The inside of the trailer was clean. Too clean. Sanitized, almost. Avery clocked a whiteboard on the wall, schedules, shifts, emergency calls. At the bottom, circled twice. March 14th, night shift, canceled. Why'd you cancel that night? Avery asked casually. Tyson blinked. Had a stomach bug. Didn't want to risk being out in the field. So you stayed in? Yep. Didn't leave the house all night. Avery nodded slowly. Anyone who can confirm that? Tyson hesitated. Nah, just me. I crashed early. Outside. Avery texted Ramirez. Run Tyson Wells' phone GPS for March 14th. Look for activity between 9:30 to 11:30 p.m. cross-reference with Emily's location. 15 minutes later, the reply came in. Wells' GPS was disabled that night, but Snapchat metadata shows him near the football field at 10:14 p.m. Also uploaded a blank story post. Same minute Emily's photo went live. Avery's pulse quickened. Wells had Emily's phone, or he was with her when she took that photo, which meant Mason might have been telling the truth. At least partially. He found her, but maybe she wasn't dead yet. That night, Avery replayed the voicemail one more time. I think someone's following me. I thought it was Mason, but I don't know. This truck keeps circling. Avery pulled up the traffic cam logs from the street near the high school. One red truck, looped by 4 times. License plate, TXY 7329. Registered to Tyson Wells. The next morning, Avery returned to the trailer. This time, he wasn't alone. A forensic warrant in hand, for deputies by his side, and the full weight of suspicion finally pointing somewhere other than the Granger house. They found Emily's phone buried under Tyson's crawlspace. Wrapped in a plastic bag, battery removed, but intact. And on that phone, a video, not posted, not even saved to the camera roll, just cached in the recovery file. Emily, shaky hands, whispering, I don't know where I am. If someone finds this, please tell my mom I love her. Tell him I tried. I didn't want to go with him. But he said if I screamed, he'd burn the whole field down. Said no one would miss me. Underscore. She drops the phone. There's a shadow moving in the background. A man's voice. Laughing. You're not going anywhere, sweetheart. Not tonight. Tyson Wells was arrested within the hour. No struggle. No statement. Just the hollow smile of a man who thought he could outsmart grief. And very nearly did. But in Caddo Springs, justice was still jagged. Because Mason Granger? He did find Emily that night. And instead of calling for help, he sat beside her, whispered to her, held her hand, even after her breath slowed to silence. In his mind, he was preserving her. In reality, he was abandoning her. And Sheriff Granger? He covered for the wrong son, and it cost him everything. In Caddo Springs, a badge wasn't just a symbol, it was a mask. And when it slipped, it revealed not monsters, but men desperate, flawed, and frightened. Sheriff Bill Granger hadn't been seen in public since Tyson Wells' arrest. The man who once walked into diners with a tilt of the Stetson and a nod of command now avoided eye contact even with his own reflection. The morning after Wells was taken into custody, Granger turned in his service weapon voluntarily. He hadn't been charged, not yet, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Detective Avery sat across from ADA Lorraine Brandt in her downtown office, a place that smelled faintly of lemon oil and rising pressure. "Wells is our guy," Avery said. "Emily's phone, the confession video. It's enough to put him away for life." Brandt nodded, flipping through a thick folder of evidence. "But that doesn't clear Mason entirely. Or the sheriff." "No," Avery agreed. "But it changes the story. Because this wasn't the simple case the town had wanted to believe. Jealous boyfriend snaps. Father covers it up. This was worse. Emily had cried for help. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. And each time, someone had ignored it. After Wells' arrest, the town's temperature shifted. Candlelight vigils turned into angry town halls. Reporters from Dallas and Houston descended on the square. One morning, someone spray-painted "No More Secrets" across the courthouse steps in red. By noon, it was trending on TikTok. Caddo Springs had become a symbol, not of justice, but of the system's failure to act when it mattered most. Avery visited Sheriff Granger again. No more questions. No more interviews. This time, just truth. "He didn't kill her," Granger said quietly. "I knew that. I believe that. But I still helped him hide it. Because you thought you were protecting him? Because I thought I was protecting myself," the sheriff said. He walked to the window and looked out at the empty street. "You know what it's like, raising a kid alone? After the cancer took Lisa, it was just Mason and me. I missed games. Missed warnings. He changed and I didn't see it. Didn't want to see it." Avery listened silently. Then that night, he came home, blood on his hands. Said he'd found her. I looked at him and all I could think was, "Please, God, don't let this be my son's doing." But it wasn't, Avery said. "Not all of it." "No," the sheriff said. "But that doesn't make me innocent." In the aftermath, investigators uncovered more. Emily had filed a report against Tyson Wells months prior. Unwanted messages. Strange late-night sightings. She told a school counselor who escalated it to local law enforcement. But the report never made it past the front desk. Why? Because the deputy who received it was Donnie Banks, Granger's oldest friend, and a mentor to Tyson through the volunteer squad. He didn't destroy the report. He misfiled it, claimed it got lost in a digital backlog. When Avery confronted him, Banks didn't deny it. "I thought it was nothing," he said. "Just another crush. Didn't think the boy had it in him." He wept as he said it, but his tears couldn't bring Emily back. At Emily's memorial, the pews overflowed. Not just with students and parents, but with people from neighboring counties, law enforcement agencies, and even strangers who had followed the case online. Photos of her danced across a projector screen, smiling at the beach, posing with cheer teammates, laughing with wind-blown hair. Pastor Thomas, an old friend of the family, stepped up to the altar. "Emily wanted to be a teacher," he said. "She believed in kindness, even when it wasn't returned. In light, even when the world grew dark." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, not even Mason's. From the back of the chapel, in handcuffs and under guard, he watched the service in silence. A judge had granted him temporary release to attend under tight security. Afterward, as he was escorted back, he turned to Avery and asked, "Do you think she knew?" "Knew what?" Avery asked. "That I didn't mean to leave her." Avery didn't answer, because intention was a poor substitute for action, and inaction had killed her just the same. Weeks later, Mason was released on probation. He pled guilty to obstruction of justice, unlawful disposal of evidence, and failing to report crime. He would never wear a badge like his father, would never be trusted in that way again. But he was alive, and Emily wasn't. As for Tyson Wells, the trial was swift. The video evidence, digital footprints, and Emily's haunting final recording painted a damning picture. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In his final statement, he offered no apology, only a twisted justification. "She liked the attention. She led me on. She made me believe we had something. In the courtroom, Mrs. Wallace stood and whispered, "No, you made yourself believe." Sheriff Bill Granger formally resigned the day after the verdict. His last act as sheriff was to send a letter to every family in town. In it, he apologized to Emily, to her parents, to the department, to his own son. "I wore the badge, but I lost my way. I confused love with silence, authority with immunity. And in doing so, I failed the one person who needed protecting most." He moved away shortly after. No one knows where. Detective Avery remained in Caddo Springs just long enough to tie up loose ends. In a town council meeting, he addressed the citizens publicly. Justice is not a moment. It's a culture. And culture starts with accountability. Then he left. No ceremony. No farewell party. Just a quiet drive out of town as the sun broke over the horizon. But in Caddo Springs, the story didn't end. Because stories like this never really do. They live on in whispered warnings, in cautious parents, in school assemblies, and battered trust. In the red-stained words still fading from the courthouse steps. No more secrets. Grief doesn't leave. It lingers in halls where lockers once slammed shut, in text threads that stop mid-sentence, in the empty space at the dinner table. In Caddo Springs, grief had taken up permanent residence. It started with a mural. On the back wall of the high school gym, a student painted a portrait of Emily. Soft eyes, sky blue background, and a halo of books and wildflowers. She was drawn standing, barefoot, arms open. Not an angel, not a ghost. Just a girl still here. Principal Halverson approved the mural quietly. No ribbon cutting. No press. Just a paint-splattered tarp peeled away one morning before first bell. But by third period, the whole school knew. Some cried. Some stared. Some avoided that hallway altogether. Because looking at Emily on that wall meant remembering, and most weren't ready. At the Wallace home, the windows stayed shuttered for weeks. Emily's mother, Marissa, no longer opened the blinds in the kitchen. Her father, Daniel, took leave from the auto shop and started building birdhouses. Dozens of them. He lined the fence with them like guardians. They didn't talk much. Not about the case. Not about Tyson. Not about Mason. Only about Emily. Always Emily. "Do you think she was scared?" Marissa asked one night, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel didn't answer right away. "I think she was strong," he finally said. "I think she knew we'd keep her story alive." Online, #JusticeForEmily trended again after Tyson Wells' sentencing. True crime podcast dissected every detail. Who failed, who helped, who turned a blind eye. But it was Emily's final video that haunted the internet. Even though the footage wasn't released publicly, a transcript leaked. Within days, TikTok creators posted reenactments. Some tasteful, some exploitative. One influencer with 500,000 followers whispered the lines into a candlelit camera. "Tell my mom I love her. Tell them I tried." The comments exploded. Candle, rest in power, Emily. Pouting face, where were the cops? Wilted flower, she deserved better. Others weren't so kind. Maybe she shouldn't have been out that late. Clout chasers turning tragedy into content SMH. Avery watched from afar, silent. He knew grief online was a strange beast. Part empathy, part performance, and part parasitic. Meanwhile, the state launched an internal review of Caddo Springs' law enforcement procedures. Deputy Donnie Banks resigned in disgrace, facing civil liability for negligence. In an ironic twist, it was Mason Granger, formerly accused, now legally free, who agreed to testify in the review board hearings. Avery met with him once more before the hearing. They sat in a diner just outside town. Mason looked thinner, sober, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. "You ready?" Avery asked. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready," Mason said, stirring a cup of black coffee. "But I owe her this." "What are you going to say?" "The truth. All of it." When Mason took the stand in Austin, reporters filled the gallery. He told the committee about that night, how he found Emily, how he panicked, how his father helped him hide the evidence. But more importantly, he talked about culture. "I grew up thinking the badge meant we were untouchable. That justice was something we could adjust. My dad didn't teach me that directly, but he never corrected it either. He paused. We didn't protect Emily. We protected ourselves. And now, one committee member asked, now I'm trying to fix what I helped break. One word at a time. In Caddo Springs, some began to forgive. Not forget. Never that, but forgive. The Granger name was no longer spit like a curse. Mason started volunteering at the youth center. Quietly. No cameras. No PR. He stayed out of the high school, out of public spaces, but his presence was felt in apology notes, in donated textbooks, in an open letter published in the local paper titled, I Was Silent. I Won't Be Again. Back at the Wallace home, Marissa finally opened the blinds one morning. She didn't realize she'd done it until sunlight hit the kitchen tile. She stood in it for a long time, just breathing. Later that day, she visited the mural. Students stepped aside, unsure what to say. She reached up and touched the painted edge of Emily's cheek, as if trying to feel warmth beneath the brushstrokes. Hi, baby, she whispered. The town slowly began to heal. The school installed an anonymous reporting system for harassment and threats. The sheriff's department brought in an outside oversight consultant. And every March 14th, a candlelight walk was planned, not just to remember Emily, but to recommit to watching out for one another. If you see something, say something. Even if it's your friend, even if it's your boss, even if it's your son. That became the motto. Detective Avery returned once more to the place where Emily had been found. The wildflowers were blooming again, tangled in the brush, defiantly bright. He stood there alone, listening to the wind through the grass. We failed you, he murmured, but we won't forget. He left a white ribbon tied around the tree nearest the clearing, and then he walked back to his car, one slow step at a time. Because justice wasn't a gavel. It wasn't a sentence. It was the echo that remained. And in Caddo Springs, that echo was finally being heard. Justice had been served, or so the headlines said. But justice doesn't clean the blood from memory. It doesn't stop the what-ifs. It doesn't rebuild a town. It only gives it permission to try. 6 months had passed since the trial. 6 months since Tyson Wells was sentenced. Since Sheriff Granger disappeared into the margins of history. Since Mason Granger stood in front of a microphone and offered the most public apology Caddo Springs had ever heard. The town was quiet now. Not peaceful, just quiet. As if everyone was waiting to exhale. In a newly reopened school counseling wing, a student named Leah Palmer sat across from Ms. Jarvis, her hands clenched into fists. I know I sound paranoid, she said, but there's this guy. Keeps demaying me from different accounts. I blocked him twice. Ms. Jarvis took notes, nodding gently. Do you feel unsafe? Leah hesitated. Not yet. But I did with Emily. And no one listened then. That sentence hung in the air like a loaded gun. Ms. Jarvis stood up and walked to her desk, pulling out a referral form. This time we're listening. The town had changed. No one said it out loud, but you could feel it. Teachers now attended training on trauma-informed classrooms. The sheriff's department installed body cams and brought in new hires from outside the county. At town hall meetings, residents asked harder questions. About transparency, about trust, about accountability. We used to just nod and smile when the sheriff spoke, said Irene Little, a retired librarian. Now we listen. Then we ask why. Mason Granger still lived in Caddo Springs. He rented a tiny trailer on the edge of town, out past the pecan orchards. Worked part-time at the feed store. Kept mostly to himself. Some folks still crossed the street when they saw him. Others waved. Most just stared. He didn't blame them. I don't expect anyone to forget, he told the owner of the feed store, an old man named Chuck Redden. I just hope they don't freeze me in the worst moment of my life. Chuck grunted. As long as you don't freeze yourself, son, the rest'll catch up. Emily's room remained untouched. Her mother still sat there sometimes, listening to her daughter's old playlists, Fleetwood Mac, Taylor Swift, Phoebe Bridgers' soft, melancholic soundtracks to a life cut short. One day, she opened a drawer and found an envelope addressed in Emily's handwriting. To me, if I ever get famous, it said. Inside was a list. Things I want to be remembered for. Laughing loudly in the library. Standing up for the quiet kids. That time I ate 13 mozzarella sticks and didn't puke. Making people feel less alone. Marissa wept. Not because of the list. but because Emily had always known what mattered most. Detective Avery, now back in Houston, kept a small reminder on his desk. A pressed wildflower from the field where Emily's body was found. Some days he stared at it for minutes. Other days he couldn't bear to look. He'd taken on new cases, missing persons, fraud, a cold case homicide, but none quite left the same mark. One morning, his phone buzzed with a message from Lorraine Brandt, the ADA. School board passed the Emily Wallace Protocol. Mandatory reporting, digital harassment training, crisis hotline embedded in school app. Avery smiled. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Caddo Springs High held its graduation ceremony in late May. The air smelled of honeysuckle and cut grass. Every seat was full, and every student wore a white ribbon in memory of Emily. Her name was read aloud. There was no awkward silence, no sobs, just a standing ovation, as if every student in that stadium had made a silent vow to carry her with them, not as a ghost, but as a guide. That night, Mason stood in the shadows of the football bleachers, watching from a distance. He hadn't asked to attend, didn't want to make it about him. But when Emily's name was read, he closed his eyes and whispered, "You should have been here." A voice behind him spoke. "You still can be." It was Principal Halverson. "There's a group starting in the fall," he said. "Peer mentors, survivors, kids who've been through something." Mason turned, surprised. "You wanted to be part of it?" "No," the principal said, then smiled. "Emily would have. There are crimes that shatter, but some leave behind more than broken pieces. Some leave behind change. In policies, in people, in the quiet choices made every day to be better than the silence that came before." Caddo Springs hadn't healed completely, but healing isn't linear. It's messy, uneven, full of wrong turns and small victories. Justice, Avery once said, isn't about closure. It's about continuation. And in this town, this once trusting, now reckoning town, justice was still echoing, one voice at a time. A town doesn't rot overnight. It happens slowly, when the truth is traded for comfort, and silence becomes more valuable than justice. The envelope arrived on a Monday. No return address. Just a single piece of paper inside, folded once. Typed neatly at the top. "There's more to Emily's story. Look deeper." Sheriff Granger didn't act alone. Detective Avery held it under a lamp, scanning for fingerprints or watermarks. Nothing. No smudges. No stains. Just that cryptic message and a postmark from Caddo Springs, dated 2 days earlier. He turned to Lorraine Brandt, the assistant DA. "This feel like a crank to you?" She shook her head slowly. "Not in this town. Not after all we've uncovered. You said it yourself, Granger covered for his son. Who else helped him cover for others?" That afternoon, Avery drove back into town. He took a detour, past the high school, the church, and the shuttered VFW building where old-timers still played cards by candlelight. This was a town that knew how to keep its secrets. But secrets don't stay buried forever, especially when someone starts digging. Avery's first stop, the old case files. He'd requested access to the Sheriff's Department archives, specifically sealed juvenile incident reports involving harassment or assault. Most were routine, vandalism, underage drinking, minor school fights. But one stood out. Case ID #CSD 4012. Date: October 14th, 2017. Incident: anonymous report of alleged assault at lake cabin party. Victim: redacted. Suspects: Tyson Wells. 2 others, names sealed. Outcome: insufficient evidence. Case closed without charges. Avery tapped the folder. 2 others. He flipped through the final page. Typed in small font at the bottom. Report signed off by Sheriff Granger. He tracked down Deputy Tanya Rivera, the officer who'd originally logged the report. She'd since retired, now living in a small ranch house west of town with her dogs and a coffee addiction. At first, she was hesitant. "That case was dead before it hit my desk. I was told to drop it. By Granger, him and Donnie Banks," said the girl, changed her story. "But I never spoke to her. Never even saw her name. Whole thing felt sterilized." "You think it was connected to Tyson?" "Hell yes. But in this town, that boy was untouchable." Avery dug deeper. With a court order, He got access to sealed juvenile records. Confidential, redacted, but patterns started to emerge. Between 2016 and 2020, there were 5 reported assaults involving either Tyson Wells or his known associates. Each followed the same pattern. Victim's identity redacted. Investigation abruptly closed. Signed off by Sheriff Granger. Most disturbing of all, none were ever referred to external agencies. The circle of silence was airtight. Until Emily. Lorraine called him late that evening. I found something in the DA's storage room. Old complaint forms. One from Emily's guidance counselor, filed 6 months before her death. Said Emily came to her crying. Said someone was following her home. Said she was scared of Tyson. Why didn't we see this before? Because it was never submitted. The counselor was told to handle it internally. Granger again. We need to find that counselor. Her name was April Sanchez. She now lived in Galveston, working at a middle school. Avery made the 3-hour drive in silence, turning the pieces of the puzzle in his mind. When he found her, she didn't pretend to be surprised. I tried, she said, eyes welling. I really did, but I was told to back off. Told I'd misinterpreted a teenage girl's drama. Who told you that? Sheriff Granger. In person. He came to the school. And Emily? Did she say Tyson threatened her? April nodded. She didn't give details. Just said, if I end up missing, it was him. I thought she was exaggerating. I didn't know, God, I didn't know. Back in Caddo Springs, the walls were starting to buckle. The media had quieted, but whispers returned. Who else knew? Who else helped bury the truth? Avery compiled a list. Sheriff Granger. Deputy Banks. A local judge with ties to Granger's re-election fund. A school board chair who once received a campaign donation from Tyson's father. This wasn't just one murder. It was a machine built to erase accountability. And now that machine had cracks. Meanwhile, Mason Granger had begun writing. Not for a blog. Not for an apology tour. Just for himself. In a weathered notebook, he wrote what he remembered. About the lake house. About the parties. About the nights where silence became a habit. Dad said if we stuck together, nothing could touch us. But we weren't untouchable. We were infected. And now, the town is coughing up what we buried. He didn't know it, but those notes would later become the foundation of a grand jury investigation. Emily's voice hadn't died with her. It lived on in evidence, in testimony, and now, in revelation. Justice had been served in the courtroom, but accountability? That was just getting started. And as Avery left the town archives late one night, he found another envelope slid under his windshield. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Black and white. Grainy. A young girl. Face bruised. Looking over her shoulder. On the back, scrawled in red ink. She wasn't the first. And she won't be the last. Unless you finish what you started. Every small town has its ghosts. But Caddo Springs didn't just forget its victims. It buried them alive in silence, shame, and denial. The photo haunted Avery. The girl's eyes, wide, bruised, and full of terrified awareness, followed him like an accusation. He knew she wasn't Emily, which meant there was at least one more. Possibly dozens. He stared at the red ink on the back again. She wasn't the first, and she won't be the last, unless you finish what you started. The paper was torn along the edges. The ink looked like it had bled slightly from water. Maybe tears, maybe rain. But the message was clear. Emily's death was only the most visible break in a much older chain. Avery brought the photo to Lorraine Brandt. She scanned it slowly. Where did this come from? Someone slid it under my windshield. Same handwriting as the last note. No, this one's sharper, angrier, more personal. She nodded grimly. We need to find that girl. Using the courthouse's facial recognition database for juveniles was legally tricky. But Avery had a workaround. He took the photo to April Sanchez, the former guidance counselor. She took one look and gasped. That's Melissa Groves. You're sure? I taught her older sister. Melissa was in the foster system. Moved around a lot. Got expelled from Caddo Springs High her junior year. Why? She was caught with drugs, but something never sat right with me. She went from honor student to total collapse in 6 months. Avery's jaw tightened. You think she was assaulted? I think she screamed for help, and nobody listened. He found Melissa living in Amarillo, a halfway house, 2 years sober. She didn't recognize Avery when he showed up on her porch, but she recognized the photo. She didn't want to talk at first. Lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. Took 3 drags in silence. Then spoke. That night ruined my life. You don't have to relive it, Avery said. I've never stopped reliving it, she replied. What she told him that day filled in the missing pieces. She was 17. Attended a party near the quarry with a friend. Tyson Wells was there. So were 2 others. She remembers laughing, drinking something sweet. Then nothing. She woke up hours later in the back of a pickup truck, disoriented, bruised, and bleeding. Her friend was gone. Her phone smashed. I went to the sheriff's office. Granger told me I was confused. Said I must have fallen or been jumped by a stranger. He never even filed a report. Why do you think he covered it up? Because one of the guys was his son, and the other was the mayor's nephew. She looked down, then up again. Emily didn't die because she was loud. She died because she couldn't be silenced. Back in Caddo Springs, whispers were turning into tremors. A local journalist, Cara Blevins, had gotten wind of the reopened investigation. She'd covered Emily's death early on, then gone quiet when the town turned cold. Now she wanted back in. You've got more than a murder, she told Avery. You've got a protection ring, an institution of silence. She wanted to publish the Melissa Grove story. Avery hesitated. Melissa deserves privacy. She also deserves a legacy. This is bigger than one girl. It's systemic. After speaking with Melissa, Avery agreed. On one condition, names would be redacted until charges were filed. The article dropped 2 days later. The ones they silenced. How Caddo Springs protected predators. It was a gut punch of a headline, and it went viral. Not just in Texas, but across the nation. Suddenly, every neglected case, every hushed-up complaint from small towns with deep pockets and deeper secrets was under scrutiny. Cara's inbox exploded with tips. One caught Avery's attention. You think Melissa was the first? Check out 2013, the Halloween bonfire. You'll find a name, Kennedy Abbott. Her story never made it past the principal's desk. Avery found the old yearbooks. Kennedy had vanished after sophomore year. No graduation, no obituary. He tracked her down through a counseling center in Fort Worth. She agreed to meet, but only under one condition. I speak. You don't record. Kennedy was different, composed, sharp, but beneath the surface, controlled rage. They stole my truth. Then they made me out to be the problem. She detailed the night in 2013, another party, another drink that tasted wrong, another blackout. When she told the school, she was suspended for defamation. Her parents moved her away within a week. It was always Tyson. He was the common thread. Him and his rich boy circle. And every time someone screamed, this town pressed the mute button. With 2 testimonies and a stack of buried reports, Avery and Lorraine moved forward. An emergency grand jury was called. Mason Granger submitted his journal. April Sanchez gave a sworn statement. Melissa Groves agreed to testify. So did Kennedy Abbott. The case wasn't just against Tyson Wells anymore. It was against a decade of denial. At a town council meeting that week, someone taped a sign to the front doors. Large black letters on white paper. How many more before you listen? Sheriff Granger's name was removed from the high school gymnasium. His plaque at City Hall was taken down, and a new one was installed. To the voices that were silenced, and those who broke the silence. In the end, Caddo Springs began to look at itself in the mirror. And what it saw wasn't pretty, but it was real. And real was finally better than the lies. When a small town cracks, it doesn't shatter all at once. It splinters, quietly, painfully, under the weight of the truth it refused to carry. The courthouse was packed, not just with attorneys and officials, but with townsfolk, farmers, teachers, churchgoers, faces tight with dread and curiosity. Caddo Springs had gathered not for gossip this time, but for a reckoning. It wasn't a trial. Not yet. But the grand jury hearing that opened that Tuesday morning had the gravity of one. 15 citizens had been selected. Most of them had once waved politely to the sheriff at the local diner. Now, they would decide if the lawman they trusted had orchestrated one of the biggest betrayals in Texas county history, and if others helped him. District Attorney Lorraine Brandt opened the session with a photo. It wasn't Emily. It was Melissa Groves, age 17, with the bruised face, the hollow eyes. This is who we failed. Not once, but over and over. And it started long before Emily Granger was murdered. The jury shifted in their seats. Lorraine had them, and she wasn't letting go. First witness, April Sanchez, the guidance counselor. She walked to the stand, lips tight, palms flat. I reported Emily's fear. I was told to handle it in-house. That meant keep quiet. That meant protect the reputation of the Wells boy, not the girl who was scared of him. Who told you that? Sheriff Granger. In person. Second witness, Kennedy Abbott. She looked the jury in the eye. No tears. No tremble. Just ice and truth. I was drugged. Assaulted. I told the school. Days later, I was suspended for making false claims. My family left town that week. My life became about escape. Do you believe your case was covered up? I don't believe. I know. The man who silenced me got a re-election party. I got PTSD. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Third witness, Melissa Groves. Her hands shook as she gripped the microphone. She read from a single note card. I was Emily. Before Emily. I didn't die, but something inside me did. She paused. Swallowed. I was made to feel like my pain was inconvenient. Like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. But I do. We all do. Someone in the back of the room stood up silently, then sat. A silent gesture of respect. It spread. One by one. A jury member blinked back tears. But the biggest moment came next. The courtroom door opened, and Mason Granger walked in. In handcuffs. Deputies flanked him on either side. He asked to testify. Lorraine paused, consulted her team, then nodded. The courtroom held its breath. Mason stepped up, hand still cuffed, voice gravelly. My father said we protect our own. He meant Tyson. He meant his donors, his secrets, but we never protected the victims. I knew Emily was in danger. I didn't stop it. He closed his eyes. I didn't kill her, but I didn't save her either. That's my cross to carry. A beat of silence followed. Then someone in the jury whispered, he's not the only one with a cross. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered. But these weren't the usual angry crowds. These were survivors. They held signs. We believe Emily. Justice delayed is justice denied. Silence is complicity. The mayor tried to give a press statement, but was drowned out by chanting. Even local businesses got involved, placing candles in windows, ribbons on doors. A town that once refused to see was now forcing itself to look. Back inside, Avery stood in the hallway, watching it all unfold. He hadn't testified. He didn't need to. His work was in the paper trail. In the cracks he'd widened. But something was still gnawing at him. That photo of Melissa? It wasn't the only one in the envelope. There'd been two more, blurred and hard to identify. He hadn't shown them to Lorraine. Not yet. He was holding them close, like a hand of cards not yet played. Because if this was just the beginning, what came next might tear open the last, ugliest layer of truth. The grand jury deliberated for 8 hours. By dusk, the indictments came down. Sheriff Henry Granger, obstruction of justice, abuse of power, conspiracy to suppress criminal investigations. Tyson Wells, sexual assault, homicide, witness tampering. Donald Banks, deputy, falsifying reports, threatening witnesses. 3 members of the school board, negligence in handling abuse reports. 1 local judge, conspiracy to suppress charges. The town was stunned, not just by the names, but by the number of them. 7 indictments, and more on the way. That night, Avery stood by the town square. The wind was thick with cedar and firewood smoke. He saw Lorraine across the lot, talking to a reporter. Saw Melissa with her sponsor. Saw April hugging Kennedy. And he realized something. This wasn't a case anymore. This was a movement. A slow, painful unshackling. But justice is a jagged road. And in Caddo Springs, some weren't ready to let go of the past. As Avery turned to leave, a black SUV crawled past. A tinted window rolled down. A voice, a man's, called out, "You think this is over?" Avery didn't flinch. "I think it's finally starting." The night before a storm breaks, the air changes. Heavier, hungrier. It's the kind of night where truth doesn't sleep, and neither does guilt. The courthouse was quiet. Too quiet. Avery stood beneath its steps, looking up at the brick facade that once meant safety to this town. Now it felt like a mausoleum, built not to protect justice, but to bury it. The trial of Tyson Wells, Sheriff Granger, and their co-conspirators would begin in the morning. Cameras had already arrived. National reporters lined up outside the nearest motel, and satellite trucks filled the parking lot of the diner. Caddo Springs had become a symbol, not of crime, but of consequence. And consequences had a way of shaking every bone in your body, especially the night before they arrived. Inside his motel room, Avery stared at the two photos he hadn't shown Lorraine. They were grainy, taken at night, a girl in each. One near the old mill, her face bruised. The other, barely a teenager, was unconscious on a bench outside the high school gym. There were timestamps, both in 2011, for years before Melissa, 4 years before Emily, for years before any report had ever been filed. He had names now, witnesses. One girl was in Oregon. The other? She never made out of town. But there was something else. In both photos, partly obscured in the background, was a truck. Not Tyson's. A beat-up navy blue Silverado. It belonged to Deputy Donald Banks. Meanwhile, across town, Lorraine Brandt lit a cigarette on her porch. She didn't smoke. Not usually. But tonight, her nerves overrode her lungs. Tomorrow, she would stand before 12 strangers and try to make them believe that a town's most trusted men were predators. Even with the indictments, the case wasn't guaranteed. There were whispers of jury tampering. 2 jurors had been approached in the past week. One recused herself voluntarily. The other, well, she hadn't returned calls since yesterday. Lorraine tapped ash in her coffee mug and stared into the dark. She was worried, but not scared. Fear was for the innocent. She hadn't been innocent in a long time. Tyson Wells sat in a holding cell 2 hours away in Amarillo County. He hadn't spoken to anyone except his lawyer, but something about his stillness unnerved the guards, like a man waiting for someone else to pull the trigger. And someone just might. That night, Avery's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. You're barking up the wrong tree. Drop the trial, or we'll bury more than the past. Attached was a live photo, Avery's truck in front of his motel, zoomed in from less than 30 feet away. Whoever sent it wasn't bluffing. He drove to Lorraine's at 11:30 p.m. She answered with a file folder in one hand and a pistol in the other. You too, huh? She said. We need to lock this town down. Too late. We should have done it years ago. They went through the new evidence, the photos, the dates, the Silverado. Lorraine clenched her jaw. Banks was never just an accessory. He was a recruiter. Avery nodded. He didn't just cover up the crimes. He supplied the victims. They decided, first thing in the morning, they'd issue a warrant for Banks. But they wouldn't get the chance. Because at 4:12 a.m., a fire broke out at the evidence storage facility. Half the case files went up in smoke, including physical reports tied to Kennedy and Melissa. By sunrise, Caddo Springs looked like a battlefield. Smoke curled over the courthouse lawn. Reporters flooded social media. Avery arrived just in time to see firefighters tossing a melted server rack into the back of a truck. He recognized it. That was the digital vault of abuse records April Sanchez had helped build. The one that proved timelines, names, and suppression signatures. Gone. Lorraine arrived, lips white, knuckles tighter than a vice. They knew exactly what to burn. That wasn't desperation, Avery said. That was strategy. This trial is going to be a knife fight, she muttered. He nodded. Then let's sharpen ours. But something shifted as the day wore on. Witnesses grew nervous. Melissa almost backed out until Kennedy talked her down. The mayor announced an emergency hearing to remove Lorraine as lead prosecutor, citing potential bias. Lorraine laughed in his face. The only bias I've got is for justice. The motion failed. Barely. The tension in the air was animalistic. Like everyone was bracing for a bullet, unsure where it would land. That night, Avery took the long way back to his motel. He passed the high school, then the church, then the cemetery where Emily was buried. There was a fresh bouquet on her grave, a note tucked inside. He opened it. For the ones who never got to testify, you gave us a voice. Keep going. No signature, just a ribbon. Black and gold. Emily's cheer squad colors. As the town slept restlessly beneath a bruised sky, a storm gathered above the panhandle. Lightning struck twice, once near the quarry, once near the mill. The past wasn't done yet. Tomorrow, it would speak in the voices of the betrayed, the buried, and the brave. Justice doesn't come like a sunrise. It crashes in like a storm. And when it finally hits, you don't feel vindicated. You feel scorched. The courtroom was standing room only. Cameras were forbidden, but the nation was watching. In the front row, Melissa Groves, Kennedy Abbott, April Sanchez, their faces tight, unblinking. In the back, Sheriff Granger's wife, alone, veil pulled low. Mason Granger sat in the witness chamber, eyes down. And in the defendant's seat, wearing a tailored suit and a face full of disdain, Tyson Wells. On the wall above him, the Texas state flag hung limp. It felt like a symbol. Prosecutor Lorraine Brandt approached the jury with calm fire. This isn't a case about mistakes. It's a case about choices. The choice to ignore victims. The choice to silence truth. The choice to let a predator live like a prince while his prey was buried 6 feet deep. She held up a photograph. Emily Granger, age 17, smiling. Innocent. Gone. She was his step-cousin. She trusted him. She told teachers, friends, even her father. No one listened. And then, she was dead. She pointed to Tyson. He killed her. With his hands. But not alone. She turned to the second table, where Sheriff Granger sat in a separate trial stack. The system helped. And today, the system will answer. The defense struck back quickly. Tyson's attorney claimed there was no DNA, no murder weapon, no confession. What we have is a town full of rumors and a DA looking to make a name. They painted Tyson as the scapegoat of a grief-ridden community. He's not on trial for murder. He's on trial for being rich, white, and hated. Then came the witnesses. Melissa Groves took the stand first. Her voice shook but didn't falter. He lured me into the janitor's closet, said I was special, that no one would believe me anyway. He was right. She paused, eyes flicking to Tyson. He knew how to disappear behind a smile. The defense objected. The judge overruled. Next, April Sanchez. She testified about the suppression of records, the school board silence, the meetings in backrooms. She finished with, I lost 2 students to silence. Not again. Then, Mason Granger. Every eye in the courtroom turned. His voice was quiet, measured, haunted. My dad knew. About Tyson. About everything. I found photos in his safe. Some of them were girls who never came forward. He hesitated, then added, one of them was Emily. The courtroom exploded. Gasps. Murmurs. The judge slammed the gavel 5 times before order was restored. Lorraine approached. Why didn't you say this earlier? Because I wanted to believe he'd change, that he'd retire, that the monster in him died when Emily did. But monsters don't die quietly. They wait. And then the twist. Avery submitted a recovered backup drive from the evidence facility, one the arsonists had missed. Encrypted, dated 2011. Inside were police reports, altered, redacted, some deleted entirely. But in the metadata, a name popped up. Deputy Donald Banks. Along with login attempts by Sheriff Granger. We have the cover-up. We have the edits. We have the timeline. Avery whispered to Lorraine. She stood, triumphant. We rest, Your Honor. The defense scrambled. Banks refused to testify. Took a plea deal instead. In return, he confirmed that Tyson had confessed to shutting Emily up the night she threatened to go public. He described a meeting where the sheriff said, if this leaks, we all burn. The defense collapsed, and with that, the jury went into deliberation. They returned in 4 hours. We, the jury, find the defendant, Tyson Wells, guilty of murder in the first degree. Cheers erupted outside. Inside, sobs, hugs, silent shaking. Sheriff Granger's trial began the next day. He was found guilty of obstruction, conspiracy, and tampering. He collapsed during sentencing. A stroke, they said. He never served a day. In the weeks that followed, a dozen lawsuits were filed. The school board was replaced. 3 more survivors came forward. Melissa started a foundation. Kennedy enrolled in law school. April wrote a book. And Emily? Her grave now had flowers every week, not just from family, from strangers, from survivors, from a town that finally understood what it had done. Avery stood in front of her grave one last time before leaving town. He left behind a single note. "You weren't forgotten. We were just late, but we're here now." He placed it beneath the ribbon and walked away. The courthouse was quiet again, but not because truth had gone silent, because it had been spoken. And in the heart of Texas, in a town once buried in silence, a new sound was rising. Not a scream, not a cry, but the sound of people finally listening. In the end, Caddo Springs was never the same. The sheriff's station was shuttered. The town council resigned. The high school dedicated its library to Emily Tucker. Locals still whisper about that night. Some say the real monster wasn't Mason, but the system that protected him. And in a town where law meant loyalty, justice meant silence, and the sheriff's badge meant power, the truth had a price no one was ready to pay.